Hi, my name is Heather Miller, and I'm here to explain to you how to fill out the IRB application for Heritage University when working with human subjects. You're going to notice at the very front of the application, it says IRB application for human subjects research. So you're in the right place. We've created a table of contents so you can click on any of these to get yourself to different sections of the IRB application. And we have instructions. Please take the time to carefully review the instructions. It's really important. Filling out an IRB application is like doing your taxes, and we have to have specific information. Please don't cut and copy information into this. Please answer the questions authentically and individually, meaning please don't cut and copy from an existing proposal. Please answer the questions within the application, and please try to make them as brief as possible. There shouldn't be any more than 6 sentences to answer any one question. So when you're going through the IRB application, you're going to go ahead and go through it, and then you're going to email the information to heritage.edu along with filling out a form. I'll talk about that in another video. When you're submitting the information, please include the co-PIs or students or other folks that you're doing the study with so everybody knows who's going to be part of the application. And when you get your application back, if you get it back, there's going to be feedback on your application. You're going to see we have different sections on this IRB application for the review team to give you feedback and then for you to make changes. So let's look at it here in real time and show you what we need from you. So first of all, we need to know what type of application you're doing. You can click the box depending upon if you're on a PC or a Mac. You can click the box and you can check it and it will check, okay? Or you can uncheck it. And if you can't figure that out and your PC doesn't do it, or if you're working on a Google Sheets or something, you can just put an X, the initial application for approval, and if your study is externally funded. Next, you're going to want to have all of the names of the people who are part of the study, including the time that they've completed their city certification. Please see the information we have on the website regarding city certification, but for each person who is part of the study, you're going to need to include their date of city certification, and you're going to need to include it as part of your application submission. So you might have to do a little bit of digging depending upon who you're working with. Feel free to add, if there's additional co-investigators, you can add additional rows here. The next is the type of the research that you're doing. If it's undergraduate, graduate, faculty, student and faculty, you can click whatever boxes you need to, again, to tell us the type of research, what program you're in, and this is very important. This is how IRBs track what's happening in the system, your project title. The length of the study is how long will it take you to complete this study. Remember, if you are doing a study that could take several years, you can go ahead and, indicate how many days it's going to take. Is it going to take 2 years? Is it going to take, 90 days? It just helps the IRB understand how long you expect your study to be for this particular part of the study, and also to monitor if appropriate. At the end of each section for the feedback and revisions, if the reviewer has a question, they're going to put the date, their feedback, and then in this column here, you would say how you addressed it, okay? So what's important to know is that please don't revise any original answers. You would respond in this box here about the changes that you're making. The reason why this is important is because IRBs have to track what happens over time, not erase. Because we're using a Word document, it makes it super easy to erase. So we don't want to do that. We want you to go ahead and say how you would make the changes and put it in this area for feedback and revisions. There's a feedback and revision section at the end of every part of the IRB application. The next section is your participants. Your participants, you're going to click all of the boxes that represent your participants. The reason why we do this is because IRBs have to look at different types of participants in different ways. Some things might fall under institutional policy, some things might fall under federal regulation, some things might fall under local and regional laws. So just check all of the boxes that are appropriate to the participants that you have in your study. Please note that this is about who is going to be eligible for your study, and please see the website for additional support and understanding what eligibility means. Here you're going to list your inclusion and your exclusion criteria. So again, this is all the criteria of who would be eligible for your study, and you're going to want that to make that as specific as possible. It's going to be so specific that if somebody passed by a recruitment flyer or somebody was speaking to them to enroll them in the study, that person would know that they fit the qualifications. They would know they're eligible to be in the study. And below that, you're going to list the exclusion criteria. What does it mean not to be in the study? Sometimes it might even be an opposite of the inclusion criteria, or maybe there's other specific characteristics that you would need to list. So please be careful to clearly answer these. Please make a list, so a bullet point is really helpful. How many participants, and again, how many people do you think are eligible for your study at your study site? This helps us understand if you want to collect data from 20 people and only 30 people work there, we might have to do other things and look at your study in a different way in terms of recruiting people so they don't feel like they're obligated to participate. So again, please answer these questions to the best of your ability. The feedback and revisions section is the same. Again, your reviewer will put the date if they have any feedback, and then here's where you would put your response back to the reviewer. Recruitment procedures. The recruitment procedures talks about exactly how you are going to recruit your participants. Are you going to go to certain sites? For example, schools or offices? Are you going to different colleges? Is it going to be on social media? All of the things, all of the ways that you would go to recruit participants would be listed here. If they're going to be outside the United States, you need to let us know, and we actually have a supplemental form that you would fill out. If they're going to be in the United States, you just click the yes box. And here you're going to talk about all of the ways that you're going to advertise. Are you going to call them? And for all of these types of way that you would advertise, you would include in your supplemental documents, which would be submitted with your IRB application, examples of what this will look like. Social media posts. Will you be calling them? Will you have a phone script? Will you have a letter? So answering these again, and just 2 to 3 sentences for this section should be more than adequate to just answer so that the review team can understand how you're going to recruit. If you are screening prospective participants, remember that screening can only be yes/no questions, and you can't ask so many questions that you're actually collecting data. You might ask a question, are you over 18? Yes. Do you work at Google? Yes. And that would be a screening question. So be very careful if you decide you're going to use screening that you're not actually collecting data. No data can be collected prior to consent, so you want to be very careful how much personal information you get up front, if at all. We have a section regarding relationships with the participants or the research site that helps us understand what we need to know and ask you to make sure that the participants are safe and that you're not in a position of power that could somehow put the participants in a position that could be seen as coercive. Remember, we can help you navigate these things. We just need to know what we're playing with here. Again, at the end of every section, the feedback and revisions, you write your feedback, or the reviewer will write their feedback and you'll respond. The informed consent procedure is very important. You're going to have an informed consent letter. That's part of your application. And you're going to describe where you will collect that. Maybe if you're collecting information using an online platform like SurveyMonkey, you might say it's going to be collected in SurveyMonkey. Maybe if you're going to be interviewing people, maybe you'll say you're going to be presenting informed consent when you sit down to do the interview, even if the interview is over something like Zoom. But you're going to want to go ahead and be very clear. Informed consent is nothing that's rushed. It's an actual process. So you're going to want to be sure that you budget the time appropriately if you are interviewing and where the participants could ask you questions to make sure that they are prepared to understand what they're doing in the study. Feedback and revisions, as we already discussed. The research procedure section talks about how you're going to design your study. What's the general study purpose? Again, please try to answer these in less than 6 sentences. 2 to 3 is best. What's your research design? And list your research questions. Here in the research activities section, you're going to want to list the actual activities along with how long it will take for each activity. For example, one-to-one interview, approximately 45 minutes to 1 hour. Where are you going to meet with the participants? How many times? And in addition, any types of instruments or interview guides. Are you going to use a questionnaire, a survey? Are you going to have, what are you using to gather the data? And are you going to be video or audio recording them? Or are you going to have any external participants helping you? Deception or coercion in a study. This is sometimes done with certain studies where the participants think that they're going to be doing one thing, but really you're looking at another. If you're using deception or coercion, you need to let us know. And again, the feedback and revisions. Compensation and incentive sections, that's where you might give the participants, say, a gift card or an Amazon link for Amazon Prime, some sort of compensation or incentive to participate in your study. You need to explain how you would do that and how they would get it. The risk assessment is when you have to decide if there is a risk to the participants, either indirect or direct. So maybe it's not a risk to an individual participant, but it could be a risk to an organization. Or maybe it's not a risk to an organization, but it could be a risk to the individual participants. Sometimes the risk is very minimal, like the participant might feel uncomfortable answering a question. Sometimes the risk could be higher. So please, when you're considering your study, be sure that you list out the risks and the steps that you're going to do to minimize those risks. Things like having interviews in a private space so nobody can hear, keeping the information confidential, that's all very important. If you're doing a study with existing data, for example, test scores or employee satisfaction, data that's been collected in the past, you're going to want to go ahead and let us know that. And if the data is public or private, you're going to have to determine. A public data set would be something that you could find, anybody could find from their phone, and you would include the links. And a private data set means you need a special agreement. How are you going to get the data from the organization or the school? Again, same thing at the end of every section is the feedback and revision, so the reviewer can put in their feedback and how you've revised that section. Confidentiality is very important. We're in a world where nothing is really anonymous anymore, aside from walking into a grocery store and having a section where you would say, oh, I like salt and vinegar potato chips. Other than that, even your IP address, all your smartphones, smartwatches, everything can actually track where you are. So we want to talk about how you're going to keep people's information confidential during recruitment when you're trying to get them and during data collection. What are you going to do to keep the information confidential? Are you going to change things to pseudonyms? Are you going to change the names of the participants after you collect the data? Remember, it's your responsibility as a researcher to keep the information confidential, not the participant's responsibility. So be sure to consider that. How are you going to keep your data secure? And this is a tough one in some cases, but you're going to want to have a plan to the best of your ability. We realize that technology is always changing, but you really want to consider this as data security and data privacy. Those are really big issues when it comes to protecting human participants. The next few pages talk about the supplemental documents that you are going to be including with your application. So you're going to want to go ahead and click on all of those. And then finally, you're going to include your signature. You can type that out here if you want, but please know that you're making sure that the information is true and correct and whoever is involved in your study. And down here at the end is where the reviewer will give you feedback and tell you what to do next, if at all. Okay, so please take the time to go over the application carefully and be prepared and try to give us the cleanest submission that you possibly can with the most complete answers that are less than 6 sentences. Thank you so much for your time.